Hello YouTube and welcome back to another alternate history video. Today I got the 1980 presidential election, which of course was held between the incumbent president Jimmy Carter and Republican challenger Ronald Reagan. And there was also a third party guy who ran, John B. Anderson, who got 6% of the vote, as you see there. He formerly did try to get the Republican nomination, but of course went to Reagan's, and then he ran as an independent. And like I said, got about 6% of the vote. Wasn't really much of a factor, but he had pretty decent showings in some states, especially like in the Midwest where he was from, Illinois. However, in this alternate scenario, this is if John B. Anderson is the Republican nominee. So this is if he actually won the Republican nomination, of course, and Reagan maybe doesn't run or Anderson pulls out an upset and gets the nomination somehow. But I'm going to go with maybe Reagan doesn't run and Anderson just gets it against the other guys. And so how would he do? So 1980, of course, was marked with a lot of inflation, also foreign policy disasters with the Iran hostage crisis, and Carter suffered because of that in his approvals, and Reagan was able to cruise to a big victory in the Electoral College, definitely getting 489 electoral votes. Only got 50% of the popular vote though, but it was still a 9 point margin in the popular vote because Carter got 41%, while Anderson, like I said, got 6.6%. And so with Anderson being the Republican nominee in this situation, I think it would be much closer actually, because Anderson was more of a liberal Republican, I guess, on the Rockefeller wing of the party. And so I don't think he would do as well as Reagan, especially in the South. I think Carter would do much better, but I think Anderson would pretty much win all the other states, like in the Plains and West, and would do a lot better in Northeast and Midwest, where he was from Illinois. But I think Carter would do a lot better in the South, which would make it a little closer. But getting into it, so like I was saying, I think Carter did much better in the South. Carter would definitely win some state of Georgia, and I think it would win these states like Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, all the states that he won in our timeline. Well, he actually only won West Virginia. Reagan won all of these states, but I think with Anderson being on the ballot, that Carter would take them because they were actually close in the actual scenario, decided by a point or less. Some of these states like Arkansas, Alabama. I think with Anderson being on the ballot, that Carter would take them. Like I said, much more liberal Republican type. So I don't think he would do too well in these southern states, giving them to Carter. And for that reason, I think Carter would actually take Missouri. Missouri was actually more of a big margin for Reagan, as you see here. But I think Anderson would struggle in a lot of the rural areas. Carter would do much better in them. So I think for that reason, Carter would win it. I think Anderson would do better in a place like St. Louis, but I think Carter would still win that probably too. And like I said, Anderson would falter in a lot of the rural areas, wouldn't do as well as Reagan in them. So I think for that reason, Carter could take them. Missouri was more of a swing state back then, however, it was a bellwether. So maybe Anderson could hang on to it, but I just see him really faltering in a lot of the rural areas, and Carter would take it, I believe. Probably pretty kind of narrow, maybe by a couple points, few points. I think Anderson would be more favored in these plain states like the Dakotas. It probably wouldn't as big as Reagan did due to kind of being turning off some voters due to his more liberal stances. But I think due to the issue of the economy that he would still win them. Same with Nebraska, Kansas. I think he'd win those plain states due to the economic issue, and he would probably win the Mormon Belt here still. Maybe you could see a third party, more conservative challenger, maybe Reagan himself or somebody would try to run, but if it's just like a head-to-head matchup, I think Anderson would take these. Probably not as big as Reagan because they'd probably be turned off his more stances on social issues, but I think they'd probably still hold their nose and vote for him anyway. Same deal in Montana. Probably could get a little closer, but probably still go to Anderson since it was a solid win for Reagan. I think it would take these states like Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. Were not as populated back then as they are now, and Carter didn't really come close to winning any of these, so Anderson would probably still take them. Probably saving Nevada too. That wasn't really close as I recall. And Anderson would probably take a state like Alaska, but Carter would probably take Hawaii still, due to being very historically Democratic since statehood. Anderson would probably take these West Coast states still, like Reagan won them. Reagan was from California, of course. I think Anderson would still take it, even with Reagan not being on the ballot, due to them being more Republican leaning. around the time, and I think Anderson would do pretty good, like in suburbs, cities, and the state, while Carter would do better in rural areas. But I think if Anderson's performing a lot better in cities, that he would win them. I think a state like Minnesota, though, would still go for Carter. Vice President Mondale was from there, and Anderson wouldn't do as well in rural areas like Reagan did. So a solid win there for Carter. A state like Oklahoma and Texas, however, Oklahoma actually went for Reagan, solid margin. Carter did better in the southern part, as you see there. But I think if Reagan did a lot better in these parts, that Anderson would do the same. Texas, I think, would get closer due to it being a southern state and Carter being from Georgia, like I said. Uh, I think Anderson would do worse in the rural areas like these other states, but it was a solid win for Reagan still. And Texas, was trending more Republican around this time anyway. And of course, Reagan had George H.W. Bush as his running mate. I think Anderson could still win it, but it would be by a reduced margin, probably around 4 or 5 points. I think it would get much closer to Carter doing better in rural areas, but I could say Anderson doing good in places like Dallas, Houston, more of the suburban type areas in Texas, and kind of still win some rural areas, but Carter did a lot better in them, so I think it would make it much closer. But I think Anderson can still pull out a win there due to Texas trending more Republican around this time. I think Anderson would win a state like Indiana, very culturally conservative. It probably could get a little closer, but Anderson would probably still pull it off due to the economic issue. And I think it would win his home state of Illinois. Like I said, he was from there. That was also Reagan's birth state as well, and he won there. I think Anderson did really well around the exurbs and did good, pretty good in Cook County. Carter would probably still win it though. Carter would probably do better downstate in the rural areas, but I think Anderson could pull it off due to it being his home state and doing well, like I said, in exurbs and suburbs in the state. Getting into the Northeast here, New York was actually won by Reagan. He did pretty well upstate. Carter did better, like in the boroughs. I think Anderson could do pretty decent in the boroughs, but I don't think he'd do as well upstate, and I think that would hurt him. So I would actually give this to Carter in this scenario. Like I said, it could still be a close one due to Anderson doing pretty good in some of the boroughs, but I think if he's struggling in upstate, not doing as well as Reagan, that Carter could pull it off due to the boroughs like New York City and Syracuse and places like that. The states of New Hampshire and Vermont, however, I think we go for Anderson. They really like their more liberal types and still do today, so I think he would win them pretty solidly since Reagan won them. Massachusetts, however, I think would be kind of close. Anderson could do pretty decent in it due to his more liberal stances, but I think Carter could pull it off since he did win against Reagan due to it being more culturally liberal. Same with Rhode Island, winning for Carter. I think he would still win it here too. Connecticut and New Jersey, however, I think Anderson would do well in. Like I said, I like the more moderate, the liberal types, just like New Hampshire and Vermont. So I think Anderson could pull them off. Delaware was another Reagan state. So if Reagan was able to win it, maybe Anderson would too. Maryland, D.C., however, would go for Carter, I believe. Maryland due to Baltimore. And D.C., of course, being a Democratic stronghold since it's been taking part in the Electoral College. The rest of the southern states, I think, would honestly go for Carter, like North Carolina and South Carolina. They were close in our timeline, and due to Anderson not doing as well in rural areas like Reagan, as I talked about in other states, I think Carter would actually pull them off in this scenario. Florida and West Virginia, however, that was kind of a different story, especially Virginia. It was more historically Republican around the time. Carter did a lot better in rural areas. But I think Anderson could still do decent enough in the northern part that he would still win it, probably by a few points. The state of Florida was also a Reagan state. That wasn't as close. It was actually about 17 points. Carter did a lot better in the Panhandle as expected, but Reagan did better in the central and southern part. And if Reagan did better in these parts, maybe Anderson still could too as well. But I think it would be a little closer, but due to the economic issue, I think Anderson could pull it off. And the state of Maine, I think it won all of it since Reagan did. I think it could do good in this part of the region due to being the more liberal type. The state of Pennsylvania was a Reagan state. Reagan did really well in the suburbs like Bucks, places like that. Carter did better in the western part, but Reagan also did pretty good in the T part of the state. I think Anderson would fall off in the T part and Carter do much better in the western part. But if Anderson's still doing pretty good in like the suburbs, like in Bucks and Chester County, they could kind of narrowly pull it off due to the economic issue, and that does put them over the top at 285. Like I said, I think it would be a close one. Carter did better in the western part, and Anderson will follow some in the T part. But if it's doing good, like in Bucks and Chester County, around that part, they could pull it off. Carter did better though, like in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh probably, but I think Anderson can pull off a narrow win there due to the economic issue. Same Wisconsin, Michigan, honestly. Wisconsin would probably be a closer one, but Reagan did pretty good, I believe, in the Driftless area. Doing good in other places as well. Carter do better in, like, of course, Milwaukee and the northern part, as you see there. But due to the economy, I think Anderson can still pull it off. Same with Iowa and Ohio. I think they would be a little closer due to Carter better in the rural areas, but Carter was actually against farm subsidies as president. He actually opposed expanding them, and that would hurt him in a state like Iowa, where it is a big farm state. So I think Anderson can pull it off due to that issue. And he does get the victory 350 to Carter's 188, so still a victory, but reduced win from Reagan's victory. If you agree on us, comment below. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, hit the bell if you haven't, and I'll see you next time.